let me just remind people, of course, that they are listening to and watching the Electronic Intifada live stream, and I'm here with my colleague, Nora Barrows-Friedman. And many of our viewers will know that Canadian author Yves Engler was released on Monday after spending 5 days in a jail in Montreal in what appears to be another case of retaliation and repression against a supporter of Palestinian rights. Yves was initially charged with harassment in connection with social media posts criticizing Dahlia Kurtz, an influencer notorious for using social media accounts to spread hatred against Palestinians and Muslims, as well as to disseminate debunked October 7th atrocity propaganda used in attempts to justify Israel's genocide in Gaza. After police called Yves Engler and informed him of his impending arrest, he went online to refute the accusations of harassment. On dozens of occasions, I've responded to Kurtz's racist, violent, anti-Palestinian posts on X, Engler wrote on his website. Because of that post, police then claimed that Yves Engler was also harassing the police and added a whole series of new charges. These events are described by Owen Schalk in an article published this week by the Electronic Intifada. The group PEN Canada, a group that defends freedom of expression, wrote a letter to Montreal Police Chief Fadi Daher and Montreal Mayor Valérie Plante expressing concern over the violation of Engler's rights. The group stated, quote, PEN Canada takes the position that it is not a crime to take a pro-Palestinian stance in public. It is not a crime to object to those who support Israel's actions or to describe them as fascists. It is not a crime to criticize or condemn the state of Israel. It is not a crime to write that Israel's actions in Gaza are genocide. To object in print or otherwise to others who support Israel's actions is not a threat to any individual or to the police. And Alex Tyrrell, leader of the Green Party of Quebec, described Engler's jailing as a shocking attack on free expression and democratic rights and criticism of Israel in Canada, a country that's supposed to be a free, democratic society. So who is Yves Engler? He's the author of 13 books, including Canada's Long Fight Against Democracy, his latest co-authored with Owen Schalk, and Canada and Israel Building Apartheid. Yves Engler not only speaks truth to power through his books and writings, including many articles for the Electronic Intifada, he also regularly speaks truth right into the faces of the powerful themselves. And there are dozens of videos of Yves directly confronting political leaders over their support for Israel's crimes. And I would like to just take a look at a few of them. And the first one here, this is Yves Engler confronting Canadian Foreign Minister Mélanie Joly on November 3rd, 2023.
Madame Joly, why are you enabling Israel's crimes against Palestinians? You have blood on your hand, Madame Joly. You went to Israel to support what the massacres, more than 4,000 Palestinian children killed. Madame Joly, tu devrais avoir honte. Tu as le sang des Palestiniens sur tes mains. Madame Joly, tu devrais avoir honte. Tu soutiens les massacres palestiniens contre les Palestiniens. Plus que 4,000 enfants morts, Madame Joly.
And the next one is Yves Engler confronting Chrystia Freeland in April 2024 when she was Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister of Canada.
You condemn Israel's killing of 14,000 children? Minister Freeland, you condemn Israel's killing of 14,000 children? Excuse me, stop blocking me. Do you condemn Israel's killing of 14,000 children? Minister Freeland, why are you just walking away? Do you condemn the killing? Do you call for a two-way arms embargo?
And let's take a look now at a video from March 2024 of Yves Engler directly confronting, I shouldn't say Governor Justin Trudeau, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
No. Out.
Mr. Trudeau, you're enabling a genocide! Mr. Trudeau! You're enabling a genocide! Mr. Trudeau! Why are you enabling a genocide in Gaza, Mr. Trudeau?
And This was going to be the last one, but I added one more, so we're going to do two more quickly. This is Yves speaking to Valérie Plante, the mayor of Montreal.
Madame Plante, are you willing to condemn Israel's Holocaust in Gaza? Madame Plante, will you condemn? You condemned October 7th, Madame Plante. You condemned October 7th. Can you condemn Israel's Holocaust in Gaza? You've criticized the students who oppose the genocide. Madame Plante, can you condemn Israel's Holocaust in Gaza? Just say, I condemn Israel's Holocaust in Gaza. Can you say that? Madame Plante, can you say that?
And the last one, which I believe Yves just posted yesterday, which I think is good evidence that he has not been scared into silence by his recent experience, shows him confronting Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservative Party and likely the next Prime Minister of Canada. Let's take a look at that.
Poilievre, Mr. Poilievre, do you condemn Trump's plan to ethnically cleanse Gaza? Do you condemn Trump's plan to ethnically cleanse Gaza? Mr. Poilievre, do you condemn the plan? Are you a genocidal Jewish supremacist, Mr. Poilievre? Are you a genocidal Jewish supremacist? Do you want more Palestinian children killed?
Wow. So, as I said, there are actually dozens of these videos that Yves has posted.
It's relentless.
And, yeah, he is absolutely relentless. And so let's bring on the man himself and welcome Yves Engler to the Electronic Intifada live stream.
Hi, Yves.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Hi, Yves. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Great. Well, we're happy to see you released from jail. It seems absolutely surreal that you went to jail over tweets criticizing a notorious supporter of Israeli apartheid and genocide and for criticizing the police. What do you want to tell us about your experience and the status of your case to the extent that you can talk about it?
Well, I think the first thing is it was a small victory for freedom of expression and for campaigning on Palestine. I won, or we won, because it was huge support. The ability to keep talking about the fact that Dalia Kurtz got the police to charge me for challenging her violent anti-Palestinian posts. It's outrageous. It took 5 days of jail to win this battle over a condition. It has nothing to do with the actual case. That's going to proceed in a couple months. But it's just the ability to talk about it. And so, yeah, basically Kurtz, 7 months ago, she did this sort of declaration on X saying that I was harassing her and stopped talking about me, or stopped responding to me, this kind of thing. And but she never blocks me, as someone pointed out right away. Just block him if you don't want him to be able to respond to you. Block him. I've never met her. I've never messaged her. I've never talked to her. I don't follow her on X. So it was very easy for her, but she wanted to set up this sort of legal avenue. And the police went along with it. They initially investigated, open investigation. They closed it. And this prominent lawyer, who's now a conservative candidate in Montreal, Neil Oberman, after he sent a letter supporting Kurtz's claims against me, they reopened the investigation, and then they decided to charge me. And when I went public with these charges, the police's reaction was to basically double down and to say that I was now harassing the police. So initially, I'm harassing a social media commentator by responding to her posts, and then I'm harassing the police by writing about the fact that I'm being charged for criticizing Israel. Who knows where this will all go? I'm hoping the Crown will ultimately just drop it all. I have a very hard time believing that a judge will find me guilty. But this is the sort of state of the police kind of judicial apparatus, that they are willing to move forward with this obviously kind of absurd campaign to make my life difficult and suppress my ability to talk about these issues.
Do you think that's what the purpose was? And do you think what are they calculating? Do they not know who? I guess they do know who you are, since you're in their faces a lot of the time. Do you think there was an element here of retaliation because you are constantly holding these politicians to account? Do you think this was targeted retaliation against you?
I think there's no doubt that Dahlia Kurtz and Neil Oberman launched this to basically go after me. There's no doubt about that, of course. I actually challenged Neil Oberman when he brought the injunction, this lawyer who's a Conservative candidate here in Montreal, when he brought the injunction against the McGill encampment back in April. I challenged him at the courthouse, and he got very angry about this later on. And so I was definitely on his radar at that point, if not before. And he's launched like dozens of legal battles against different Palestine-related stuff over the past year or so. So this is what he does. He's a prime example of the lawfare that's being used by Zionist groups, across North America and the world, I guess. So that's definitely now for the Montreal police. Like I said, they opened the investigation. So Kurtz, back in the summer, brought this evidence of me allegedly harassing her to the police. The police opened an investigation, decided that it didn't warrant charges, and closed the case. Then this Oberman gets involved formally, and then it gets back open. I'm not sure I think it's likely that the initial police investigator was actually just being kind of lazy. She's under pressure. There's a sort of, there's all this anti-Semitism, these pro-Palestinian mobs, there's all this sort of political rhetoric in the dominant media, particularly Anglophone media here in Montreal. And I'm not sure if what she did was just sort of like pass this along. I don't really want to deal with this. I just pass along to the Crown. The Crown may just drop it. Now, once I publicized this, and specifically this business of this condition that they were trying to impose that said I couldn't talk about the charges against me effectively, I couldn't talk about Dahlia Kurtz. Once I publicized this, the police's reaction to that, I think, is basically the police just sort of defending their own. Now, I think they're defending their own, but they wouldn't have brought 4 more charges against me for harassing the police if it wasn't a sense that they had a sort of okay within the policing structure to do that, i.e. that I'm obviously on the radar of the Montreal police in a broader level. And so they, decided to sort of throw the book at me in that sense, knowing that there was sort of broader support for doing that within the structure of the Montreal police. So that's my presumption, but I of course don't really know.
Yeah. And there were some elements of your detention that people were pointing out was, they restricted your access to a lawyer. They kept, I think, changing the day or the time of your hearings. Can you tell us a little bit about these, what looked like very punitive measures as you were already in jail?
Yeah. When I showed up on Thursday morning to the detention center, the police office, they could have just arrested me, charged me, fingerprinted, and let me go, right, in 15 minutes. That was actually what the police inspector initially said they were going to do when it was just the charges against Dahlia Kurtz. It was going to take 15 minutes and then just be on your way. I presented myself. It's not like they were searching me. I live in Montreal. I have 2 young kids. It's not. So they could have done that. The police, as part of the going after me with the added charges as well, they decided they were going to detain me. And the Crown then, I had a video hearing 4 or 5 hours later. The Crown objected to my release. Again, I could have been released then. So then you're in jail. Then the next day, on the Friday, again, the Crown played games with conditions. So we could have had the bail hearing on the Friday. They played games with that, forcing it off until Monday. And as you noted, despite my lawyer on the Friday asking the judge to mandate the jail to allow me to speak with him throughout the weekend to prepare for our defense for the Monday, they absolutely refused. And I pushed the matter repeatedly at the jail, and ultimately on the just before lockdown on Sunday night, when I really pushed it, I got kind of almost, kind of an argument with the guards on this. They just basically laughed at me like, yeah, right. So what? We don't care. And I don't actually think that was political against me. It was actually political in the broader sense that the policing or the prison structure is totally dehumanizing, and people's rights are sort of thrown out left and right. And I saw that, a lot of that. So, and then there was apparently a bureaucratic error on the Monday. I show up at 7:30 in the morning to the guards saying, why haven't I been taken to the courthouse, which is downtown Montreal? And they say to me, you're not supposed to go to court until tomorrow. And I was basically certain that was wrong, but I didn't have any formal document, and I sort of pressed it, and they said, no, we looked into it, it's tomorrow. And I was confused. And then 4 hours later, and this is where the solidarity in the courthouse, and about 100 people showed up in the morning, and this is where the solidarity, I think, really helped. 4 hours later, the judge basically calls the prison and says, why isn't the prisoner down here? He was supposed to be here this morning. And because there were so many people that turned out, I think that added kind of immediacy on the judge to take this question seriously. And so then they forced the court to the prison to send me down to the court, and we were able to have the trial at the end of the day. It should have been in the morning. At the end of the day, and I should also state within this bail hearing, that's all it was that my lawyer didn't even have to present the defense of why this condition was wrong. The judge, just at the end of the Crown laying out their case, the judge basically stepped in and said, you have to come to some agreement. This makes no sense. You're basically blocking him from being able to talk about this case, and basically forced the Crown to negotiate with my lawyer to something I was willing to agree to. We told them right away that I was willing to basically just myself block Dahlia Kurtz, so I can't respond to any of her comments. But I still have the right to talk about Dahlia Kurtz, still have the right to talk about the case. And basically the Crown was forced to concede to that as the condition, rather than this much broader condition they wanted to impose.
Yeah.
And as you pointed out, Yves, many people came down to the courthouse, and thousands of people wrote to the police, to the mayor of Montreal, and to other authorities in your support. And there have been many public statements, which is incredibly important in these situations. It shows the authorities that the person they're targeting is not isolated and is not alone. That's incredibly important. As you know, there is apparently a wave of repression in the West against supporters of Palestinian rights, including crackdowns and criminal charges against students for protesting genocide on their campuses, bans and violent police repression of demonstrations, and arrests and raids on independent journalists and activists. That includes, of course, the British police raid on the home of our Electronic Intifada colleague, Asa Winstanley, last October, when police seized his devices as part of an investigation into his social media postings. There's also been a pattern now of independent journalists and activists being stopped and interrogated at the airport when returning to their home countries. Most recently, this has happened to Max Blumenthal returning to the United States from Nicaragua just a few years ago. And David Miller, who also has written for the Electronic Intifada and is an academic and journalist, was detained under the Terrorism Act for several hours just in the last day or two, returning from Beirut, where he was covering the funeral of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. And we've seen similar things happening with Richard Medhurst, Kit Clarenberg, and we've seen people like Tony Greenstein, an author and activist in the UK, criminally charged, again, over tweets related to Palestine. Yves, do you see what happened to you as being, and I should mention, of course, my own experience in Switzerland a month ago when I was jailed for several days as well, and that case is ongoing. But do you see what happened to you as being part of this bigger pattern of repression? Do you think it's all coordinated?
I don't know if it's all coordinated, but it's certainly part of a broader pattern of repression. On February 13th, I believe it was, I spoke on a webinar with the BC Civil Liberties Association lawyer that was headlined the New McCarthyism in Canada, and basically all about the crackdown against Palestine solidarity in Canada. And there's just like a litany of cases, most of them that got very, very little attention, from a lawyer that was had police come and investigate her, question her over some tweets, to the higher profile case of the Indigo 11, who put up posters on a bookstore that the owner of the bookstore funds this fund for lone soldiers, finances non-Israelis joining the Israeli military. And they put up posters. Allegedly, these people put up posters. They got their houses raided in the morning for putting up a political poster, alleged political poster, and 11 of them got charged. The most egregious example of that in Canada is what's happened to Charlotte Cates and the Samidoun Palestinian Political Prisoners Network. Cates is an activist in Vancouver. And a few months ago, the Canadian government actually listed, alongside the US, but I actually think this was a Canadian initiative, listed the Samidoun as a terrorist organization, basically criminalizing the organization having anything to do with it. And I've had a number of discussions with activists in Vancouver about how the police raided, before that, they raided Charlotte Cates' home. And they detained her at a different period, coming off a bus and stuff like that. But then I talked to a bunch of activists in Vancouver, and there's kind of like attack against anyone who's claimed to have any association with Samidoun, and the Vancouver police are sort of interrogating people. Some of the things about there was one of them, American citizen, who was returning to Vancouver to continue working. She had a proper work visa, but they blocked her at the border, and there was all this interrogation around some of the Palestine stuff that she was doing. So there's no doubt, and you see it like little things that a campus like here at Concordia, Montreal, they hired this outside security firm that was set up by a former Israeli soldier who continues to be the head of security for the CIJA, the main Israel lobby group, and they hire his security firm to bring in security agents because the students have voted the General Assembly just a few weeks ago 885 to 58 in support of BDS. It's basically unanimity among students on the issue. And so they respond to this by repression. So we're seeing examples of this all across the country. Now, on this stuff, I find that there's a tension in terms of discussing it, because obviously we need to denounce it, and we have to have complete solidarity with those who are being targeted. But I think there's some element of it. Sometimes the paranoia goes a little too far. I think we still have relatively free societies, and it's important to not go too far in terms of letting it deter us from activity, deter us from campaigning, deter us from being bold, from continuing to take action. So there is some tensions on it. And the other part of it is that the new McCarthyism isn't because the state wanted to. It's because there's this, in Canada, there's never been a greater upsurge of international solidarity than over the past 16 months. There is no example in the history of Canadian foreign policy where there's been more demonstrations, more actions, more disruptions against Canada's complicity in an international crime. And so they are reacting to our strength in one sense, and I think we should realize that, and also use it to broaden the movement. Of course, right? To broaden, the fight for against the genocide is also a fight for free expression, and to sort of bring that together to sort of broaden political support.
Mm. Let's get into kind of the larger picture in terms of Canada's relationship to Israel, and specifically Israel's genocide over the last 16 months. Last October, Melanie Joly, Canada's foreign minister, announced that Canada had in previous months suspended 30 permits to export military materiel to Israel. Even the CBC, Canada's official government broadcaster, suggested that this was a political stunt whose seriousness could not be evaluated without more transparency. What can you tell us about Canada's role in Israel's genocide, and have you seen any real shift in its stance since then?
Yeah, the first thing to note on the political side to this is that this was an announcement just before a by-election here in Montreal, where Palestine, I think maybe the first time in history, entered the actual debate, where it became a fairly significant issue. The NDP candidate actually, not as far as I would have liked, of course, but brought up Palestine, brought up genocide. And the Liberals, which this was a safe Liberal seat historically, as part of trying to counter the fact that they were doing very bad, they ultimately lost. That was an announcement to try to generate some like, oh yeah, we care about Palestinians kind of amidst a by-election. So that in of itself is kind of interesting. Now, of course, the substance of it is not substantive. I mean, we know a year ago, after huge campaigning on the issue, lots of disruptions of Trudeau in Vancouver, a very great disruption of him having dinner at a restaurant. They got inside and pushed the arms embargo and stuff to his face. The government agreed to no new arms permits. So there was, I think, a couple hundred, I forget the exact number, 200 and something that were in the pipeline already that they didn't say they were stopping, but they weren't going to bring in any new arms permits for sales to Israel. What they did in the first few months of the genocide was they rapidly sped up the permitting process. They got it down to like 5 days to okay a permit for weapons sales to Israel. And of course, from a bureaucratic government, that's very, very fast. So I do believe that they are, probably not accepting new permits. They've kind of been open enough, said that enough times, it's probably not, but we don't really know because there is a lack of transparency. But that's a little bit to the side anyways, because most of Canada's weapons sales to Israel are via the US, right? Canadian arms companies have, going back to the 1950s, have this special relationship where they sell to the Pentagon, to the US, as if they're basically US companies. And we don't know anything about this. So there's billions of dollars in weapons sales between Canadian companies and the US that we don't know any details. And when we find out the details, it's usually via the US announcing it, US government announcing it. So for instance, in the summer, there was an announcement of General Dynamics plant here in Montreal having a $61 million US mortars contract to Israel. And so the huge amount of arms from this plant here in Montreal that has nothing to do with the permitting that Melanie Joly was referring to. And so and they've never said they were going to stop the flow of Canadian weapons to the Pentagon and to the US. And the Canadian companies provide all kinds of components to the F-35, for instance, which Israel's been using in bombing. So that question is, there's been some success, I think, on that front, but it's really minimal. Also, we should say that didn't stop the other side of the equation, which was Canada buying weapons from Israel. But then it also misses some of the maybe more substantively important side to Canada's ties to the Israeli military. So, for instance, I mentioned the Indigo. Well, Heather Reisman and Jerry Schwartz's billionaire couple, they have this fund, the Hessig Foundation, that over the past 20 years has sent $200 million in subsidized. So all Canadian taxpayers were subsidizing this as a registered charity to support non-Israelis joining the Israeli military. This violates Canada Revenue Agency rules about supporting foreign militaries, but they haven't stopped them from doing this. So Canada has all these different ties, things like the Tyrrell Foundation, where there's Canadians that go and work on Israeli military bases. Canada has all these ties, and that should contravene Canada's Foreign Enlistment Act. So all these ties to the Israeli military that actually violate Canadian law, be it Canada's through the Arms Trade Treaty, through the Foreign Enlistment Act, through the regulations around charities, that still assists the Israeli military, no matter what the Israeli military does to Palestinians, West Bank, Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, wherever. So the government's definitely not serious about ending that. And you look at it, Melanie Joly has made multiple what she called solidarity trips to Israel over the past 16 months.
And you mentioned, of course, the Canadian law, which makes it a crime for Canadian citizens to enlist in a foreign army. You've also mentioned in your postings that I've been reading Canada's Crimes Against Humanity and War Crimes Act as other potential legislation that the Canadian government and Canadian officials and perhaps even Canadian private citizens are violating. And if Canada was a state governed by the rule of law, then one would expect that the Crown, as it's called, would be vigorously investigating these crimes and laying charges against them. But instead, they are coming after you for your social media posts, public social media posts, responding to a very prominent supporter of the genocide in Gaza. Yves, you are still facing these charges, which, as you said, you hope they would drop. I don't know if you will be taking other legal action in response to what has happened to you, but just before we go, how can people stay informed about what's happening with you, follow your work, and support you if they want to and if that support is needed?
Yeah, I mean, the simple thing is yvesengler.com, YVESENGLER.com, my website. I post my articles there. There is, donate page there if people are interested in that. But I think I'm on the different social media platforms people could seek out. We're going to be doing more stuff on this. There's more. Dahlia Kurtz has now gone after a senator. Just broke yesterday. She's now targeting a senator, presumably with this lawyer Neil Oberman. There's going to be more stuff going on, both on my case and kind of associated pushback against this lawfare, really. And so I definitely, people can check out groups like the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute, Just Peace Advocates. We're going to be doing stuff on this. And yeah, on my, yvesengler.com, there'll be more posts, and I'm writing a number of stories that go into some more detail of what's transpired in recent days and how it fits into a bigger pattern of Canada suppressing Palestine solidarity. So, yeah.
Well, Yves, we are so grateful to you for the work that you do going back many years, including your articles for the Electronic Intifada, and perhaps there'll be more of those in the future. That would be something I know our readers would appreciate. And for, we're so sorry for all you endured in the last week or so. It's not an easy experience. And I'm just very glad to see that, as I expect, you have not been deterred in any way from speaking out. And I really think, Yves, what you said, I want to underline it. We are facing a wave of repression. It's very clear that that's happening, but we should not be intimidated or silenced. And you are right. They're doing this because there are so many of us, and they think that by picking a few of us off and making examples of us, they're going to either silence us or scare everyone else into silence. And we absolutely have to make sure that does not happen.
Yeah.
Thank you
so
again,
much,
Yves.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. And we hope to have you back soon.
That would be great. And again, people can go to yvesengler.com to read all of your writing, to learn more about your work, and to keep in touch and find ways to support you through this. Thanks so much, Yves.